So here's the importance not only of interpersonal growth and development, but the intra-group work, how we're able to connect this perspective to those who are in our family as well as in our community, is we gain knowledge of each other's worldview and better understand the culture of those with whom we coexist. This can lessen the othering of our people, not those people, our people. Because if we allow something to happen to one of our family members, then it's going to happen to us tomorrow, potentially, right? And at the same time, exposing ourselves to this type of knowledge of those particular worldviews, it allows us to have access to things that can enhance our quality of life. You know, when you look at different cultures and the type of perspectives that they have towards health and wellness, there's a lot of issues that we deal with right here in America that if we just incorporated certain type of herbs or seasonings, or even practice a form of caloric restriction and not eating as much that you see as traditional to other societies, we could cut a lot of our different issues that we have health-wise right in half. I was in Tanzania at the beginning of the year, and I was so impressed. I went back in like 7 months. I brought like 7 people back with me. And when I'm there, I was drinking water from a natural stream from a mountain called Mount Meru. And I look at a couple of some of the family members that are there, and I was explaining to them, like, I can't drink the water here in Western New York, and they couldn't believe it. That just didn't register them because their quality of life was much different than the type of quality of life that we live here, right? But being able to have access to them and to learn from them, it gave me much more clear ideas on ways that I can enhance my quality of life and also make that accessible to others as well. And that's one reason why I brought others back with me, so they could experience that also. We access opportunities to unpack, process, and potentially heal from common experiences, including trauma. And that's vitally important because sometimes a person can feel as if this only happens to them. You know, giving tours, I was speaking to a family on Friday. I was doing a night tour at the Underground Railroad Heritage Center. And the woman that came up to me after the tour, her heritage is Jewish. And after going through the space, she was able to see the clear connection of that journey of freedom seekers here in this country to her family members who were also freedom seekers. It wasn't something that I communicated to her, but her being in that environment and listening to the stories of the Underground Railroad, she was able to make that connection in terms of seeing the sense of humanity as well as inhumanity that could be practiced by our family members that restricts our ability to live our cultural free. Discover shared new principles, values, and customs that can potentially enrich our quality of life. And that just speaks to what I said initially about even health and wellness. We learn to better navigate cross-generational, social, economic, educational, religious, and political encounters. And I oftentimes compare the journey of cultural competence, of being in a dark room and striving to find the light switch in that room without touching the walls, right? Now, usually, when people grow up into this country and they're educated or indoctrinated about the worldview of being an American and the history of this country, there are a lot of things that are deliberately left out. I was talking to some youth the other day, and I was telling them how I grew up with 6 siblings, and I have twin brothers who are a year younger than me. So I was always responsible for reporting to my parents when we were out in the community. And if they were doing something bad, I would go and I'd tell my parents and tell them directly, this is what they were doing. Sometimes I'll be participating with them, right? And then when I went to report to my parents, do you think I told them everything? No. So I'm talking to these students and I'm like, yo, history's written the same way. They don't tell you everything. The same way you don't tell your parents or your guardians everything. And because of that, you have to be very intentional about learning things on your own and not just accepting anything on face value, because you're not going to have the accurate perspective of what something actually is. So in terms of learning how to better navigate those type of encounters, if you're not taking the initiative to learn some things, you're going to step on some toes. You're going to offend some people. There's no way around that. But if you take initiative and strive to ask questions and strive to learn certain things and to expose yourself to certain culture, you can minimize those type of encounters, right? I was doing an after school program one time, and then it eventually became a summer camp. And there was a child that was in the summer camp, and he was homeschooled. And the parents never really exposed the child to social encounters. That child was never really around no other children. The first day of summer camp, this child, and they were about 9 years old, this child walked up to another child and just looked at him, looked down at the ground, picked up a handful of dirt, looked at the handful of dirt and just threw it right in his face to see what kind of reaction they were going to get, because they didn't know that was not appropriate, right? So seeing that initial encounter, the whole summer camp, I had to consistently strive to teach this child about the social norms of interacting with other people and striving to stop some of those other children from putting their hands on him, because they never encountered him before. It was almost like he was prodding and poking them like they were aliens or something that he's never seen before, right? And that got him in situations where he was going to get hurt a lot of times, simply because he was not exposed. And I think a lot of times the way that we are educated in this country, we're taught in such a way where it puts us in a very vulnerable situation, and it's a very risky situation when it comes to dealing with other people, because some people we may not know. Let me give you another example. I was at Wegmans one day, and I had my 4-year-old with me, and we were in the checkout line. It was these two old white women that came up behind us, and they were having a conversation. They looked at me and my daughter, and they were smiling, and they said, "I know you didn't buy this one here," talking about my daughter. And they didn't see nothing wrong with it. So in my mind, I'm thinking like, well, they were probably born in 1895, so I have a respect for my elders. At the same time, I got to figure out a way to kind of check them to let them know that that's not appropriate. And, it was pretty awkward for me, right? But obviously, these young women had never been exposed to my people before to realize like, yo, that is completely inappropriate to say something like that, right? But again, when you have less experience and exposure to culture, you maximize those type of opportunities for something to happen. And usually you have no control over the reaction or the way in which people are going to, respond to what it is that you do. And again, you have a segment of our population who are devout racists, white supremacists, and that's how they live. And they are beholden to that attitude. But for the most part, you got people who just are right-handed dominant, and that's the way that they've been learning. Lastly, it's all about mutual respect and an investment in relationships that help foster community building and collective work and responsibility. And it takes time to get to that type of point, because if you're in your 30s or your 40s and you've never really listened to rap music before, you got some time to listen to an entire genre of music that, for me personally, that's been like my background music for my life. I could point out certain songs the same way some of you could point out certain songs and remember where you were at, or, you were in the back of the car with your girlfriend, or you were at the drive-in theater, or all of these different experiences. I have the exact same type of music, right? And being able to develop those relationships with one another, you could learn some perspective. And a lot of times you see that we all share the same human emotions. Sometimes we arrive at different conclusions, but we're all one human family. Next slide. So in conclusion, I just wanted to answer any questions that you may have, if I can. And I appreciate you just all taking the time to be here with us this morning. Thank you.